Hello, we're the Wideboys. I'm Jim.
I'm Ed. Check one, check two.
And we're going to give you a UKG masterclass today of our latest single with us and the Rat Pack. And we're going to show you some really cool studio tips and tricks and some top secrets.
It's going to be rave meets garage, and we're going to go fully in.
Ring ding 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 with the ball, ring ding ding dong. Yes, we're coming on, and yes, we're coming on strong. Ring ding 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 with the ball, ring ding ding dong. Ooh, could have nice to the dong, to the DJ long, DJ long.
Hello, Ed and Jim in the studio from Wideboys. We're going to talk to you about a track we've done with Rat Pack. It's an amalgamation of rave from the early days, 92, where Rat Pack were originally from, and garage, where we've come from, although we were around in the rave days. It's a collaboration of those two sounds. We're going to talk to you about how we actually did it and the techniques that we used, and just some of the background of the vibe of the session.
So Mark and Ev came down to the studio. Mark's really good at doing like rave piano, so we got him to do the piano, and then we got Ev on the vocals. Ed did a wicked bass line, and I did some drums. So everyone had an equal role in the track, and it came together really quickly and really well, didn't it? And so we've got up here the actual first recording session. So we're going to show you that, and then we're going to go ahead and show you the actual final production and all the fine details that we did to actually complete the tune, and then a bit of mastering at the end as well.
With the track as well, it was a good joining of technology and also vibe. The Rat Pack really brought the vibe and a very from the whole real raw rave scene, and then we sort of brought the tech edge to it, and the combination of the two, it really brought it together. Well. When we first were working on the melody of the piano and the vocals, we actually came out of the studio and were actually vibing on just a normal piano, and we felt that was a real organic start to the whole project. So sometimes it is good to actually get out of your normal comfort zone and go to somewhere where you might be able to get a little different inspiration for the track. So although we didn't use the actual piano, we went for a techie piano, which Jim will describe later. It originally started just vocals and piano. So
this piano sound as well, the whole idea with the rave scene as well is we use this, it's a downloadable plugin, it's called the SQ8L, and it's got a classic Ensonics piano in it from the rave days that Adamski used to use. And Mark come down saying, "Oh, I really want this piano, I really want this piano." And I said, "Do you know what?" Literally a couple of days before, and I said, "I've got this plugin that emulates it." So it's called it's a free download. So that's what we ended up doing the piano on. And then Mark recorded in just a bunch of takes that we've got over here, which we'll show you later. But this is let's play the piano now.
And
I'll show you the MIDI.
So Jim's just bringing up the MIDI, and often in dance music now we will have the piano very, very tightly quantized, all the velocities the same level. To get this more EDM or very tight sounding piano, we would do it slightly differently to how we're showing you now. But we decided to go, we did try that with this tune, but it sounded much better when we went organically with the quantization, the note lengths of the piano, and also the velocity.
Yeah, this piano here was the tight version. So all the velocities are the same, the note lengths have been tidied up, the quantize, by the way, this track's running at 40% swung, but we'll go through that in a minute. And then, as Ed was saying, it lost its vibe, you know, so we ended up going back to the unquantized version of the piano, just to give it that, like, a bit of more of a rough edge, you know, so you can see. So that was the piano. And that was pretty much the start of the track. That was the main thing. It was all based around, and it was going to be a piano drop. And then so Ed and Ev went into the other room as well and started working on some lyrics. And I just very quickly just kind of threw some drums together. So this is like the session on the day. So it's a classic London, UK two-step, like garagey type sound. I'm going to go through with how we actually mix those a bit later, because these were just kind of thrown together the day. The key to these particular drums was to use this live sounding hi-hat to give it like a bit more of a break beat, like a rolling feel. And then just a couple of snare layers. And then we had like a little stab on the day going as well.
Which also helped with the key of the vocal when we were just all putting it together, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So those drums went together super quick, knowing that we'd fix them later. The piano was already in there. And then, Ed, do you want to talk about the bass and how we come about doing the bass on the day?
Yeah, so the bass, we were looking for that rolling type of vibe that could be played in a rave set, but also a garage sound. And it actually... And often with our basses, we will take a top layer or a mid layer, we will EQ that and then have a sub element as well to fatten it right out. And sometimes we'll have up to 4 or 5 different sounds spreading over the EQ spectrum. But on this particular track we had 2.
And then later on in the other session, in the final production session, we're going to go into some really fine detail about what we do to get the basses sounding nice and clean. And
to be sitting in the mix. So, but yeah, to begin with, it was just playing on... It was just playing on...
one. No, stuck.
It was a very simple bass. It just seemed to flow nicely around the piano and the drums.
So the bass sound came from... it was based on a preset actually, but it was changed. It was one of our ones that we had stored. So we called it Deep House Bass 6. And it's kind of based on a slightly off square, really, and a low pass filter.
Spire's a fantastic synth. We use it a lot. And actually, the version that Jim's showing here is an older version. There's a new updated version with a few extra bits and pieces.
Yeah, it's a really cool little synth.
And sometimes we will actually just use an oscillator on a sub layer. But in this particular tune, we had the sub layer, which Jim's just going to put up now.
That was on an Anna synth.
That was an Anna synth. So we used the sub from an Anna, and then we used the square bass from the Spire. Sometimes we find it good to use a few different synths just to give a slightly different sound. Having had huge amounts of analog equipment over the days as well, often we would use one particular kit and then mix it with a completely, and it can give it a really fresh sound.
Yeah, back in the day where if you had an outboard bit of equipment, like Roland used to use the same digital to analog converters, so if you used all Roland for all your stuff, it used to sound a little bit, I don't know, a bit samey. So as long as you used a bit of Korg or a bit of Yamaha, we used to love spreading the different manufacturers of synths to kind of get a slightly different sound.
And we take that into what we do now with the soft synths.
And there's a bit of sausage fattener on that sub as well, just to give it a little bit of dirtiness. But we'll talk more about the bass in the final session, because there's some really handy little tricks that we can show you. So the key with this was just very, very quickly throwing it together, and something that really helps throwing a track together like this, and then because the main thing is getting the vocals recorded, is using a template. When we start up a new project, we've got a template already set with our favourite synths, our favourite settings, a few groups, and a few little things that we use regularly, so that when the template loads up, you can just jump straight on getting that vocal recorded and getting the vibe down, which is the main thing, and that's what we're trying to drive home with this initial session, that we just wanted to get a vibe rolling with the guys, and it did. It happened very, very quickly, and some of that would be down to the fact that we had a bit of prep already with the templates and stuff.
Definitely, yeah, and adding to that as well, Jim has had a very tight library system of our sounds and has always implemented that over the years. So when we know okay, kick drum, bang, we can go to it straight away, we can pull it in. And it really helps the creative process. He's spent some time, or I've spent some time, organising the samples, arranging them into places, and spending periods of time just doing that. So when we really want to crack on with the creative process, we can just go bang, kick drum, bang, snare. We know that there's going to be some garage snares there, and we're not spending... Back in the day, I remember spending a good hour looking for the right kick drum or snare sound, or even longer than that. And by the end of it, you haven't got too far. But if you spend a little bit of time just organising yourself, when you're really actually getting stuck into the creative process, it can be much
Absolutely,
quicker.
Yeah, and that's helped as well by the Cubase media bays. As you can see, we've got 4 screens here. So one of them is just dedicated to libraries and just having those ready to roll. I'm just going to pull that onto the main screen. So you've got the media bay with Cubase. And the great thing about media bay as well is, as you're previewing sounds, they can be in the same key and the same BPM as your track. So even before you pull them into the session, you can audition them to see what they sound like when they're like running with the track. And as you can see there, we've got all our libraries and everything, including our contact libraries. And so everything's streamlined, ready to go. So very, very quick access. No messing about when it comes to like the creative process and when time's tight, or if you're working with people live. So then we started to throw down, like, Ev's got like a real cool, he's like a rave MC, and he does like, I'd say his singing's like toasting over the top of rave tracks. Yeah. And that's again something that we needed to capture. So we just, we hit record and just let him roll with it. I don't know what's going to come up here. Some of these takes are going to be interesting, but let's just see what happens.
If we could turn back the hand of time, it would be good, so good.
So we were just throwing ideas at him. He was sat in front of the mic, and we were just kind of making sure everything got recorded, knowing that we'd kind of be able to go away and then start comping that together.
It's Rat Pack and Wideboys this time, baby.
There might be some swearing on this.
Swear box in.
Yeah, get your 10 Ps ready.
Turn it on.
So anyway, so we started throwing that together, and then he come up with this vibe, and let's play like the main chorus line of the track along with the piano.
Remember when we were young, when we were young.
Yeah, just going on to the vocal. A good tip for when you're working with vocals is, with the singer, have something that is believable. And if it's not believably sung by that person, it can make a big difference. So this track is Hands of Time. We're talking about going back to the rave days, going back to the start of garage. And it's very believable. And part of the reason why it hits home is because it's one bit of advice that we've had on writing camps from extremely high-end producers and vocal top liners, is to have something that's, when sung, is believable to the audience. So I think I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ev, by his own admission, will say he's not the most technical singer in the world, but it's done with a little bit of love and a bit of passion. So we wanted to keep that in the track, and it really does. It really brings it alive.
So should we talk about how that was comped then?
Yeah, sure.
So what we tend to do, we'll have the piano running, and then we'll let the vocal. We'll set a loop points. So in this case, it's 8. We've got an 8-bar loop.
Remember.
And then we just recorded him singing lots and lots of different takes of the same thing.
So we're using Cubase 9 today. Cubase has got a new transport system as well. So basically,
this is the first time I've seen this, because we record this on 8.5, and although I've got 9, Jim's been testing it out.
Exactly, because 8.5, we know how to use it, and it's a stable system. When a new version comes along, I'll soak test it and just make sure it's all working. So we're just bringing the Ed up to speed.
Yeah.
So the difference between 9 is it's got a slightly different transport system, which is really cool. It's finally got an undo button on the mixer, because until then undos were only around on editing on the arrangement screen. And there's a few other things it does. It's got like a sample track and things like that. So yeah, so the comping, really what we do, we're still pretty old school when it comes to the comping with Cubase. We just kind of take all our takes and we just slice them up into pieces and then just review each bit of the take and then piece it together, even as small as like a syllable at a time, just to kind of create one good take.
To turn back the hand of time.
So even the word "the," that was a better version of the word "the" there. So we use that as a comp.
And sometimes, depending on how smoothly we want, we'll use the crossfade function to crossfade in two different lanes or two different takes to bring that, to give it a more natural appeal. But we didn't actually need that in this particular track because we wanted it to just flow.
And then once we were happy with the main chorus comp, we also comped up a double as well.
Remember well.
It just sounded, sometimes it doesn't always sound good, but having a double of the lead can sometimes work well. Sometimes you'll have it at half volume. It depends on the vocalist and the vocal, but in Ev's instance, it did work really well having a double. And then what we did is we just whacked an auto-tune plug-in on each one of those channels, just in the key of the tune. We knew that we were working in D minor, and sometimes you have to adapt it, sometimes you have to tune it manually, but for this one, and just an auto-tune plug-in just worked straight over the vocal.
Yes, with Melodyne or the inbuilt Steinberg tuner, we will often use a combination of antares and that. Sometimes the auto-tune plugin will work better or more natural, or sometimes you want it to have a really auto-tuned sounding effect. So we found that a combination of using both. So for instance, once we had the actual comp that we wanted to use, we would then export that, do a bounce, and then we'd bring it up into the pitch and warp editor.
So one of the really handy features in Cubase is it's got like an inbuilt Melodyne, and Ed's going to talk you through how that works while I actually demo it.
Yeah, so there's different ways you can maneuver. You can shorten the length of the audio, like Jim's just doing here. So sometimes the timing might be off. So if you need to adjust the timing of a particular phrase, word or syllable, we will shift that around to fit it in nicely. But to be honest, on this track, we didn't use this feature so much, but it is something we use very, very regularly. We really wanted that natural, raspy rave feel to it and looseness.
Remember well.
So Jim's just going to move the last, so you can hear the audio changing in pitch, which is very useful if you want to create harmonies as well on the double, which is something that we'll do. So as you can see, with the waveform there as well, you can see like a natural vibrato, which can also, and a natural pitch shifting. So what Jim is just doing with the straightened pitch, he's removing those artifacts so that it can be, if you listen to that. Okay, so it doesn't sound natural, but it will be holding that exact note. It may be that antares would create a better and more realistic version of that. But sometimes we'll just move a tiny bit of the waveform so it just stays in key and doesn't drift out. Depending on what note it is, you'll see the movement. And sometimes there'll be strange spikes, which again, you can just take the edge off and just tune. So it's just a bit more pleasant to the ear. But again, with this tune, we didn't use that much. We really, really wanted to keep the vibe, but
So yeah,
very useful feature.
Yeah, we just left it natural, yeah.
And also, like for the techie people, you can get really into,
Yeah.
you can get really, really, really into it. And a lot of people are just vocal producers, and that's what they do. Just spend a lot of time producing the vocal to an extreme standard. To get the sound of a vocal to sound amazing, how you want it, it is not just one thing. It's a lot of little things all put together to create an overall sound. So we'll talk a bit more about that in the way that was produced.
Yeah. So this is a good point to actually go through some of the vocal production. What we would do at this point now, once the vocal's comped, we'd have the vocal playing out through one channel.
Remember when.
And then we would start bouncing out the vocal. So you've got all that vocal production, all the comping, and then what we'd do is we'd clean out and we'd bounce out full vocal stems and then import them into a brand new session and then almost treat it like a remix. So I'm just going to go through that bouncing process. So we've got a single channel there, and all the vocals are just put to this vocal group, and I'm just going to talk through the vocal chain that we use to process our vocals just before we bounce them. So standard stuff. First of all, we start off with a gate just to clean up any rubbish from the vocal, and then we'll use just a de-esser. All pretty standard stuff, nothing special going on here, just a bit of a tweak of the threshold and perhaps the frequency just to tune it into where the vocalist's sibilance.
Sometimes you'll get a bleed. If you're not used to vocal comping, you'll get a bit of bleed from the headphones, which is the sound that the vocalist is listening to whilst you're recording. So using the gate at the very start just gets rid of that. If you've got, say, 50 channels of vocal and each track has got a little bit of noise in, when you start adding them all up together, it can start having completely unwanted frequencies in the gaps between. So
absolutely, especially when you start using compressors that are going to even that up, so they're going to turn up that noise. So we always gate before we compress, which is like a standard studio thing throughout the years. Gate first, and then just a de-esser, just stuck to about 6K. Ev's got quite like a raspy voice, so quite a lot of de-esser was used. Then we just used like a bit of tape saturation just to add a bit of harmonic distortion.
Remember when.
And just a bit of saturation. Nothing too heavy there.
Yeah, all DAWs have got these pretty much as standard. These effects that Jim's pulling up.
And then just we used a little bit of dynamic EQ on this one. Ev had like a little bit of a boominess, particular place in his voice, and again, when it was cumulative, it was adding up. So we just kind of focused in on that bit of boominess, which was like there.
Remember when.
And we just kind of had a bit of dynamic EQ, which just kind of pulled out that boominess. A really good trick with like any vocals or any instrument, to be honest with you. I'm just going to show you just using the standard EQ to get rid of any unwanted rubbish. What you can do is you can sweep through.
Remember when.
You can sweep through and really, really boost loads of different parts of the frequency to find out if there's anything nasty sitting there.
Any problematic areas.
Yeah.
Remember when.
I mean, this vocal's been cleaned up quite nicely, but say, for instance, you can really hear it starts to get really nasty on your ears, and then you would just remove that frequency. So a lot of what we do, part of this pre-comp cleanup process, so this all happens before we get it into the main session. So there's a few handy little tricks. And then just after that, we'll just have a little bit of cleaning up the EQ on the bottom end, add a little bit of air on the top end as well, just standard kind of vocal EQ on that. Nothing really, really heavy, because we're going to probably do a little bit more later on in the process. This is all about just tidying up the vocal and getting a nice stem bounce down. And then just a little bit of limiter.
Remember when.
But probably not affecting this vocal here. But
Remember when.
So each little process is just adding a little bit. It's sort of like chipping away at a block. It's not just one movement or one thing. It's a culmination, as we said earlier.
And like Ed said as well, when you've got 50 channels, if you haven't gone and done your hoovering, your cleaning, that's all going to start adding up to a bigger mess. And then those just got, each one of those elements just got bounced down nice and tight with all like the clean-up process, a bit of compression.
Remember when?
And that was pretty much the vocal comping session and the pre, like the final project session. That's where we were.
This can really help on CPU as well, and also to keep the arrangement tidy. So if you've got, often we'll do a session and it will have 50 plus vocal. By the time you've got 4 harmonies in each harmony, then the leads, then the doubles. Once you've got all that, all with plugins, all with everything else running,
and you're working with a girl group as well with 5 singers.
Yeah,
so multiply that by 5.
Literally, you can have hundreds of audio channels. So this is a really good and tidy way of just keeping the CPU down. If your computer crashes a lot and you're wondering why, and you've got 50 vocal channels going all with plugins, do this. Just do a little bit of extra prep, but it will save you a long time in moving on with the track.
And then, so then we just bounced them down as individual stems. There's a bit of wrapping as well, which we'll go into. And then we imported those into a brand new, fresh session.
One thing as well, just that came to mind to bring you up to date. When we're doing this, especially the vocal comping, we do turn the track down a little. We don't monitor at huge levels. Like a lot of people just think, crank it up, and it can really give your ears fatigue. So we do work at quite a low level when we're especially when we're doing this, and only crank it up at certain times of the session. Thinking ahead, we also, when we did the recording, we thought, what would make it special for a DJ to play it? Because the end result, if no one's playing your music's not going to get out there. So we thought a good way of actually helping, and especially because of the type of tune it is, garagey rave track, we got Ev to do some dub plate name checks, which is basically when you name a specific DJ within a lyric. So if a DJ's got their name in a lyric, they're more likely to play it on the radio or in their sets, which hopefully may give you some more exposure. So definitely something to think in mind. If you've got a particular DJ you're really trying to get your music to, do them a dub plate special. It might just make the edge on them playing your music. So before we were looking at the recording day session, now we're looking actually the main production session within Cubase. So it's completely different. We open a completely different session, as we said earlier, to keep it tidy, to keep all that we need and minimum plugins just in one place.
They're all the exported vocals from the previous session with all their processing on. So like Ed said, it takes off all that load off your processor. And all the vocals are all nicely comped, and they're like stems like you'd get for a remix or something.
One thing that we found is super helpful, and I've noticed when we've worked with other people, not everybody does this. If you notice, if Jim just shrinks up the screens, so you can see some clear, defined colours, and it's very helpful. At the moment, there's only a few different folder tracks there, but we know we've got our own colouring system, so vocals are in red. If it's harmonies within that, they might be slightly different colours.
So a lighter colour or something.
And then we've got drums in various browns and bass in green, instruments in. So using colour, it brings a very visual side of things, and it is really helpful when you've got super amounts of tracks. You can go to something quickly. The good thing with Cubase is as well, the colours link up over to our mixing channel. So again, when you've got 100 different channels on your mixer and you're just looking for a bass, you can flick through super quick, find the track that you need, and then apply the correct techniques or plugins or EQs, whatever you want to do. And it's something that's very quick and easy that a lot of people don't do.
Ed and I, we've both got similar setups. We've both got a studio each, and we use the same colours for the same type of instrument. So when I grab a session off Ed, the minute it loads, in fact, this session was originally recorded at Ed's. The minute it loads up, we know exactly what the vocals are, what the basses are, and it just takes a lot of the labour out. It's just super
workflow. We're all about workflow, streamlining, how quickly we can do things correctly, and just little things like that do save a lot of time. Also, not only do we have the colouring system, as Jim was saying, all the vocals are in one place. So when we need to go into something in the vocal, we can just open the folder. Very easy to do that. So if you just have if you selected a lot of channels, you can just right click and add to folder. But most DAWs have a similar process, so it's very useful again on workflow and just tidy on the eye.
Yeah, so basically everything's comped up into 4 folders. The other great thing about this as well is if we had to bounce this out, which we did have to do for remix stems, so other producers could remix it for us as well, having it grouped up, we could just, you could just bounce out the drums all in one go. You can bounce out all the basses all in one go. So yeah, just right from the start, from the get-go, having that workflow in place is just going to help you out. And then in a year's time or 2 years' time, we'll get a call saying, oh, we need that session, we need a vocal, we need a sound or something like that. We can always just lay our hands on it really super quickly because we've used the same system over the years.
Yeah,
and organising your folders on your computer, on your hard drive as well is a good way of doing that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we sound so nerdy.
No, it has helped. And literally just the other day, someone had asked for some masters from 2003, and trust me, that would take 2 days to look for that if you were just going through DATs old ways. But we've got all our stuff on hard drives, multiple hard drives that is as well. Do not just leave one thing in one place. I was speaking to one of the biggest UK grime acts, couldn't provide any stems because his Mac laptop had died and had no backups for it. No backups. And that is a story that we hear time and time again.
Yeah, computer data doesn't exist unless it exists in 2 places at once.
We even say 3, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, 50 quid, buy yourself an external hard drive, keep it safe. So we're going to talk about the drums in this tune, how we programmed them, some really nice little tips and tricks, and where the drums came from. First of all, because the tune's a rave tune, and let's just give them a little blast of the whole thing about how it's working. Cool, so that's the main crux of the track there.
So, the whole point of this tune was combining the garage roots from where we were with Rat Pack's rave roots. So with the breakdown, we really wanted to give it that real rave feel. So we had the very old school rave piano, which Mark smashed. Obviously Ev's vocal, and then the breakbeat. So we're going to talk to you about we're going to talk to you, as you can hear, about how we actually did the breakbeat and then move on to the drums. So there are lots of different ways that you can do this technique. This is the technique we use just because it's something we like doing and have done for many years. So we've got the original break, and within that, it's from Lynn Collins, it's the Think Break. Within that, there were some vocal samples that we didn't actually want in this tune, and we wanted the ability to reprogram the sound of the beat. So you hear all the little vocal samples. So we didn't want them, and we wanted the ability to change the drum programming to maybe, we might want to use our quantize overall on the track, or just move some of the snares and get rid of the vocal samples. So we're using a program called Recycle, and what Jim's doing here, he's cut the loop into lots of different slices, which you can do within Cubase, Logic, Ableton, and just export the parts. But we just like working in this way. So he's cut it into different sliced sizes. And then with this particular track also we choose the loop point and a left and a right. And we bounced out, when you export it, it cuts it into the whatever slices you've chosen, and then also gives you a nice option of a Midi file as well, which we used. So once we came out of Recycle, we put a folder within our project named Recycle, and then we dropped the parts into there with the Midi break. So then, to replay that, we're actually using the Contact Sampler, which is part of Native Instruments, and we imported all the different slices within that MIDI file that we want to use.
And each of the slices gets spread, each bit goes onto a different key.
So from that, and we do that with so many instruments. We do that with vocals, so we chop up a vocal to give a vocal cut. We can use it with guitars.
Or even an old funk loop or something like that.
Funk loop, disco loops, and it's a really cool way of manipulating a loop or a phrase and putting your own stamp on it. So once we put the different slices, the good thing as well, within Contact, if we just bring that up, so within that, with each different slice on the mapping editor, you can change the start and end point. So there might be a snare that's a little bit loose that we want really tight. So we can move the start and end points. As you can see, that snare's a little bit loose on the waveform. If we wanted to, and we're going for a very tight programmed, or just wanted to hear a little bit of it, we can get rid of attack or release or decay slices of that, and we do that a lot, just especially in cut-up vocals. You can hear how it's tightening up the sound, but with this particular track we didn't. We wanted that loose rave feel. Now if we go into the MIDI part, so we imported the MIDI file, so as you can see there are some muted parts, and we've actually, to get rid of the vocal, we've chosen slightly different slices. And we've got a really tight, wicked sounding loop that's different from the original, so we've put our stamp on it. And we can also, you'll hear a looping section coming up at the end of 364, just coming up now. That, which gives it a nice up-to-date edge, and also at the end here, that obviously with a filter applied. So it's a really nice way of getting something and putting your mark or your stamp and really fitting it into a track. As you can see, the filter's being applied with a Fab Filter Simplon, just on the end, just to spice it up. Sometimes it's like, think of it as cooking. If you just have the raw ingredients, sometimes it's a little bit plain. When you start adding some spices like the filters and the EQs and the little rolls, it takes it into a meal, a nice, tasty meal.
Making me hungry. Also, the great thing about cutting up the slice as well is it gives you independent control over the pitch. But without those pitch shift and time stretch artifacts, because you've individually cut up the slices. Like Ed said, there's different ways of doing it, but that's how we've always done it over the years. Well, I think in this particular instance, it was just a case of tightening it up.
Yeah.
Like it had been sampled off a bit of vinyl, I suppose.
So it's just pitched up a little bit.
Yeah, it's just pitched up.
So once we had it there, we decided to give it that tight rave feel. A lot of people used to pitch up the breaks. So in this particular instance, we pitched it up 2. And if Jim just takes it down again on the tuning. So there's a master tune there. Just a tiny bit tighter, just a little bit on the pitch. And often we'll actually want to tune it with the actual music. And sometimes we'll change that tuning, which can be automated within the tune to give it another, as I said, spice.
Cool. So that was our breakdown that we had, and that was all sounding really, really nice. And then we wanted it to kind of explode into our drums. So we've got a bit of the old, and then it kicks in with the new.
I'll be with you. I'll be with you.
Okay, so let's just talk about those drums. The way we like to program drums, we like to use quite a lot of shuffle on our drums, which is like indicative of our style and like garage style, which comes from old kind of jazz, and it uses, people call it swing, tripleting or shuffle. And what that does is it divides up the grid into, it divides up the spacing in the grid. So the timing in between two adjacent notes is actually pushed back. And in this particular instance, we decided to use only 40% swing. I'm just going to show you on this part here the difference that swing creates and how important it is specifically for our style of music that we do. So there's a little shaker there, and it's got 40% swing. If I straighten that, it becomes very, very mechanical, which is cool if you're doing like EDM or something like that, you know, or a bit of drum and bass, or like or
trap,
or trance or something like that. You tend to use very straight. But because like the music that we do kind of originates from funk and jazz and stuff like that, we like to add a little bit of swing. So if I just add 80%, it adds like a slight shuffly type effect. But for this tune, we chose a 40% swing, which isn't a huge amount, but it's just enough just to kind of give it that little Wideboys edge that we like, and we apply that to every instrument in the rest of the track.
Just to mention as well, within our quantized frame, we've got set up a template. Do you want to show people how you just do that?
So in Cubase, you can actually set the swing here, how much you want, and then you just quickly save that there as a preset.
And then that, when you actually bring the listing down, that 43 or whatever percentage, so we've gone through and actually set up the different, because using that quantize would give the track a completely different feel very quickly.
Yeah. So basically, and that's applied to all the drums in the track. And most of the instruments, to be fair, we've applied that 40% swing. So let's just show you what it would sound like if it was straight. And then swung. Gives it a much, automatically head started bouncing there.
The head's going already.
So if you wanted to, that breakbeat that we cut up, that's pretty straight, but we could apply a bit of swing, quantize that.
And we do that often if we're having a break running with the track or with the beat. Sometimes we'll take a break and we'll just fatten up the kicks and the snares, but we want it to have the same swing. So perfect for that.
So let's just go through some of the other elements in the track. So everyone's favourite, a bit of a kick drum. In this particular instance, we used a Nicky Romero kick drum generator. And the great thing about this is it gives you so much control over the pitch, over the length. You can tune the kick drums in with the rest of your track. You can add click, you can add different little layers and stuff. This was based on a drum and bass patch that we adapted. And the great thing about using this little plug-in here, you've got like a bit of sub and overdrive and EQ. We didn't have to do much to the kick drum. The kick drum was how we wanted it as it came out of that plug-in. So we didn't have to do a huge amount of processing on the mixer. Then we took a nice chunky snare from, it's like an EDM, like an electro snare. And with that, we start getting into our EQ realm now. So what we do with a lot of our tracks to kind of free up the headroom, and we do this to pretty much every instrument, you go and have a little clean up. So, I mean, the human ear doesn't hear much above like 20 hertz, probably 19 hertz. By the time you get to my ripe old age, I'm down to like 13 hertz, 13K that I can hear. So if you can't hear that frequency, there's no point in having it in the track. Same with the bass as well. There's not very many systems that can recreate anything below like 20 or 30 hertz. So a lot of our instrumentation will actually clean up any unwanted frequencies, and we're going to keep going and showing you that particular thing throughout the session. And also in that kick as well, there was probably just a little sweet spot, a little sweet frequency, so we just boosted it there.
Again, it's the cumulative effect. Same with the vocals and the gate. It's like just, if you keep adding little bits of bass frequency, it might muddy out your mix. Might sound, why is my mix always sounding muddy? It's because you've got little bits of EQ left from snares, even hats, even crashes, and it's the cumulative effect of any EQ range. The more you stack on top, the muddier you can potentially get. Sometimes you want that mudding, don't get me wrong. Working on a particular sound, you may well need that in there, but we found since doing that technique, much more headroom.
Yeah, it gives you much more headroom, and it means the door's not struggling so much. Sorry, the EQ I had there was for the snare drum. I'll just talk about that snare. What we tend to do with our snares is there's normally a sweet spot around anywhere between 220 and 260 in the snare. There's our little sweet spot there, but we probably boosted it just a little bit more just to counteract, just so it sits nice with the kick. Kicks we tend to kind of, if you've got a sub in the bottom, kicks will boost it about 100, and then snares we boost anywhere between 220 and 250 hertz, which is a nice little sweet spot. And then we add what we call our fruity snares. A lot of people call them fill-in snares. So one of these is a layer, and it's got like that break beaty type feel to it. Add to that our main snare.
Sometimes we'll pitch those snares up, sometimes we'll pitch them down as well, which we can either do multiple ways to do that, but we're spreading the frequencies again.
Absolutely, yeah. In that particular instance, Ed, well spotted there, those snares are pitched right down to 6 semitones, and those are in our contact sampler. We've got lots of snares spread across that map there. What we would quite often do is just put a ton of snares in and then flick through them, just seeing which ones are the best ones. So again, just like having streamlined libraries really helps there. So yeah, that snare there is pitched right down to give it some real body.
If you just click into there, Jim, if you just select those parts a moment, if we're playing that loop, one of the features we use a lot is the nudge panel, which doesn't get used hugely often. And we just, to change there's just a little nudge button. So we might take, and we'll nudge it up and just find a snare. It's quite a quick way of, just rather than picking up all the channel, it's just a very quick way. And we'll use that, or even a randomization as well, depending on what.
The nudge panel not only works in pitch, but it also works in time, and it will lock onto your next quantizer as well. So it's a quick way of moving stuff around, is having the nudge panel.
That's something we use on pretty much every track as well.
Yeah. And it's used on the main arrange screen pretty much in all the editors as well, which is really handy. Then we have got an off hat. Really honing in on that kind of swung kind of vibe that we like to use, that's indicative of the style. And again, just a bit of a clean up on the EQ on that, just remove a little bit of the top, removing quite a lot of the bass of a hi-hat. You don't really need any bass in a hi-hat. And then and these hats I think just came out of Hallion, which is like one of the kind of the GM kits that comes with Cubase. In fact, it actually is stereo GM kit. Look at that.
Nice.
And those hats sound live, to give us our breakbeat feel. And then we're just finishing off nicely with a shaker. And then I'm just going to talk you through what we do about our sidechaining as well. So a really handy trick that we've developed over the years is to use an invisible trigger. And what this trigger is doing is the same pattern as our kick drum. Sometimes a slightly cleaner version. And what that does is that triggers an invisible kick drum that we haven't got set to any output, so you can't actually hear it, and that's on our trigger channel there, and that is routed to nowhere, so it's completely invisible, and that's what it's just triggering an invisible kick drum. And the benefits of that is you can independently operate your sidechain from your actual kick drum, because normally you'd use your kick drum in your track to trigger your sidechain, but in this particular instance we freed it up by using an invisible one that you can't hear. And then what I would do, I use a second mixer, and I will send that kick drum to this second mixer, which is just effects returns. So I use a send to send that kick drum to this mixer, and these are also invisible, that you can't hear them. It's not been routed to anywhere, and it's a bit complicated to describe, but we call it our Sidechain Matrix. So these are just effects returns which aren't routed to the stereo output. Our invisible kick drum gets sent to that, and then that one then gets daisy chained over to the next one and as a send, and daisy chained over to the next one as a send. And what that does is it gives us a huge amount of breakaway points for the sidechain. So now our sidechain kick we can send and route to anywhere, to any compressor that's sitting over any part. That one there, for instance, is sitting over the piano. That's sitting over another piano. There'll be side chaining of the effects returns, side chaining of the vocals, and what this Sidechain Matrix allows us to do is to take a copy of that kick drum and route it to anywhere else in the track and have as many different copies of that. Does that make sense? Or was it really complicated?
No, that's good. Using sidechains helps to sit certain elements in a track. If you just have everything playing all at the same time, landing at the same time, sometimes it can get messy. So having the ability to maybe bring the level of the attack of a piano down just a tiny bit to let the kick come through, or whatever element you want to come through, is a very, very valuable point. It gives you the flexibility of being able to sidechain one element, like the vocals a very tiny bit, or the piano maybe a bit more, or the bass you might want to really sidechain, or the brakes very hard. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. And you might think, why is my vocal not, it just seems to pop out of the mix all the time, or why is my bass fighting against the kick? Using sidechains and also EQ dependent sidechains is a very, very effective technique of helping subtly glue your track together.
So let's just do an exaggerated example of that, Ed. So we've got our invisible sidechain trigger there. We've routed it to our Sidechain Matrix, which is here, which has now been tapped off, and we've put that over a compressor which sits over our bass group, which is just here. So that's our bass group, and it's triggering our sidechain collectively across all the basses. And you can see there the invisible kick is just making that duck a bit, and we're just going to pull that down to exaggerate the effects.
So when the kick plays, it crunches the bass and compresses it to allow the frequencies of the first part of the bass, the first part of the kick to come through. So your kick might get lost in the muddiness of the bass. So that's one technique which we add to a few other things to help get that flowing nicely.
Yeah, let's talk about how we mix the kick and the basses to free up the frequencies there, Ed, using Track Spacer and using some of the other options.
Yeah, so it's a good time to go to that. Getting your kick and bass to flow nicely together is one of the most important things on this type of track. So one of the techniques that we use, and this was something that a guy called Free Jack showed us that he was using, and collaborating with different producers is a very, very effective way to increase your knowledge. As watching DVDs like this, learning different things, tiny little bits and bobs can really make a difference in your track. So yeah, this was something we learned whilst collaborating with a guy called Free Jack. So he's using Waves Factory Track Spacer, Now what this is rather than just a normal sidechain like an LFO tool or the sidechain that Jim was just describing, this is a frequency dependent sidechain. So if we've placed it on our bass group.
So yeah, we just used like we sent it from our kick drum, which is there, and we've sent that to the input of the track spacer.
So that is now the kick drum itself is now the sidechain key. And what that's doing, if we just open up track spacer again, it's moving around. When you play a bass note on an F, it has certain frequencies. When you move that bass up to a C, it then has different frequencies. So what this does is, dependent where the kick is landing and where the bass is landing, it will EQ using the sidechain to remove or compress that frequency. If you click it up again, the good thing about track spacer is on the dial, that's what Jim's adjusting now, is how much of that effect we're using. To the left and the right are the frequencies. So you can pinpoint in the frequencies you want to move. As we said earlier, the top layer is a spire. Now, to thicken that up, we used the mid-range of the spire, got rid of the bottom end, and then just really thickened up with the sub from the Anna.
Normally for that, you can just use a simple sine wave.
Just a simple sine. We decided to give this a little bit of grit to give it that old rave garage feel, which we use the sausage fattener for. So we just took it off the very, very basic waveform and just gave it a bit of distortion, warmth. Now if we go into the EQ of the spire, so as you can see,
I think that's right, yeah. Is that the one? Yeah.
the very bottom elements have been taken off, and then with our sub we might take off a lot of the top range, like so, to allow the spire to fill up that frequency. And then what we've done, we've sent that to a group, and then we're gluing that whole element together. So the bottom end of the bass of the Anna sub with the spire. Sometimes we'll use 5 or 6 layers. We might use a click, like a top click, with all the sub EQ'd off and just a high bit of end. Again, depending on the clickiness of the kick and if we have any there, but we'll try and fill out, rather than everything landing in that bottom end frequency and it getting muddy, we'll use the track spacer, the different bass sounds and the kick to solidify all that together. And we've actually, in this case, used the track spacer and a normal sidechain, so just notching out a little bit of both.
Obviously we've exaggerated the settings there to kind of, but yeah, just a little bit of everything, a bit of notching, a bit of sidechain and a bit of track spacer.
Again with the track spacer, as Jim said, we will often, if a vocal's getting lost in a mix and there's a lot of maybe synth, string or piano parts, we will use the track spacer on a group where the vocal is sidechaining that group depending on the EQs that it's hitting there as well, and that's a useful trick to allow a vocal to pop through as well. Just using it subtly, not overcooking it, but again another trick for the track spacer. So one of the things we like to do, especially when we're using a vocal, is create extra effects or sounds that we know are going to be in key with the tune by using an element of the vocal, and also it gives it a distinctive feel and sound. So in this particular track we used a vocal loop that we processed we turned it into an instrument that gives it if we just play it. So we make a loop, reprogram it, shuffle it using our quantized settings.
I think we sidechained it as well.
It
all comes from Ev, the original vocalist.
Yeah, and then we will just we'll sit that back in a mix, but it gives a background atmosphere or a flow or a groove. Subtle, but can help drive the flow of the track. And we'll also use breaths as percussion or elements, like there. And if you notice when that breath lands, we lose some of the other elements of the track to give it space. Sometimes when you want to get a fat mix down, choosing the elements and losing some elements is the best way, rather than trying to find another sound that might muddy it up.
And that works with the, just going on from what Ed was saying about removing stuff to add stuff, these complicated fills at the end. So we're removing, we've muted out all of our main elements, all the drums and all the basses, to make sure that those fills really, really pop out when they're played.
And you know, that's just a Hoover sound, but you know when that comes on in a rave and there's nothing else playing, that's going to hit the sound system in a hard way.
Just trying to look. Yeah, I think that Hoover sound was just probably from an old rave pack or something like that. Just talking. Nice. The original Hoover came from the Alpha Juno, by the way, which was a Roland machine, and I think the preset was called "What the?" ?
Having a knowledge of synths is one of Jim's strong points as well. And when we said earlier about the piano, that SQ piano is a very specific piano sound, and having some knowledge of some synths and some of the history of where these sounds came from can actually help in the sound design and save time. So spend some time mucking around, researching, playing around with old synths if you can get your hands on them.
Yeah, and know your 808s and your 909s. That's really, really important. Obviously, trap uses 808, and dance uses 909s. So that's really handy knowing the history of drum machines and things like that. Is lots of YouTube stuff. Okay, so moving on to vocal production and some of the really cool tricks that we do with our vocals. I'm just going to play you the lead of Ev there. Obviously, it's already been processed from our previous session.
When we were young.
And so one of the really cool tricks that we use there, as you can hear, when Ev stops singing, his reverb and delay get turned up.
If I could turn back the hand of time, I'd be with you.
And what we do there, and the way we do that is we actually use a standard vocal send from the vocal, and we send that to our effects return. And in that effects return, we'll have a reverb, we'll have a delay, all standard stuff, nothing too clever. But then what we do is we'll use a sidechain compressor with the sidechain button pressed in, and we'll send Ev's vocal to that sidechain compressor. So what it's actually effectively doing, every time Ev sings,
I'll be with you.
Wrong one.
Remember when
He's turning down his own reverb and delay.
When we were young. When we were young.
So when Ev's singing, he's basically creating a dry signal of himself, and then when he stops singing, the reverb and the delay and the tails pop up. Really good technique. The reason why we use this, and you can do it on bass lines to really good effect, is it allows you to get a lot more reverb and delay in the track, but without muddying it all up.
Washing it all out.
If I took that effect, if we bypass that effect and just see how much reverb and delay is on Ev, it's a bit washed out.
Remember when
You can hear the delays and stuff and the reverbs are colliding with him as he's singing. So basically, it just allows you to really, it works really well on big snare drops and things like that.
remember when
So throughout the track, we're kind of using sidechains and routing to dynamically process our track for us, and it's shifting either frequencies or volumes, moving things out of the way to create space. Another good thing about we have multiple tracks sent to the one group is it allows you to process the vocal in the same way. So we've got his lead and his double both going to a group. And just to take care of things, because Ev has got a particularly raspy voice, we're just using a de-esser there, kicking in at around 7K. It sounded really nice putting a chorus on his voice.
If I could turn back the hand of time.
Again, to give it that old rave feel.
Which doesn't always work, but in that particular instance, it was worth putting a chorus on there. Okay, and also for Ev's vocal, we do this on most vocals as well. We use a normal standard sidechain compressor, which is getting ducked with our kick drum via our Sidechain Matrix. And just to extend that as well, we're also using a standard sidechain compressor, which we put over our effects return as well. So not only is Ev's ducking his reverbs and delays, we've also got the kick drum ducking the reverbs and delays. Again, it's all about creating space and a dynamic space in your mix.
So another system that we'll use, we didn't use it on this particular track because we did want that old rave sort of feel to it, but we would use the what's called the Abbey Road technique, which is placing an EQ and maybe a saturator or valve sort of distortion in front before the reverb happens. So the signal that gets sent to the reverb and delay is an EQ'd version of the original signal. This allows you to put on more reverb and it keeps it cleaner in the mix. So Jim's just going to show you. So he's taken off quite a lot of bottom, top, and there are specific EQ settings you can use for this. So as you can see, it's, a lot of reverbs have this feel, so you can just choose elements of it, but we're using the EQ before any of that happens. And it can give it a really nice clean feel, especially if you're working with big sort of pop vocals.
Remember when we were.
And that's called the Abbey Road technique, that one. And then, yeah, another little cool trick that we did, we used some automation. We just took out some of Ev's. Let's have a little listen to his MC sections, actually, because we haven't heard those. So he did. Ev's really good at doing MCing, and he kind of just did these live like he would normally do. Just on a vibe.
Ring ding ding with a ball, ring ding ding dong. Yes, we're coming on, and yes, we're coming on strong. Ring ding 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 with a ball, ring ding ding dong. Who could have next to the dong to the DJ long, DJ long?
So what we did is we got Ev to do a bunch of ad-libs over the track as well, and we just went through and comped those up, and just like little tiny endings with some crazy effects on them. You can really go to town. And then we just automated some delays on those.
'Cause I originate.
It says. So that's got a delay on it, which just pops up on the word I there, which is a send to just a standard delay. It kind of works on anything, but in this particular case we used H delay, which is like got a nice like old reggae dub feel to it.
'Cause I originate.
And you can see there the automation just flicking on. Just playing that again.
'Cause I originate.
Yeah, sometimes you don't want the delay washing out or reverb or whatever. You only just want to turn it on just certain words, just to spice it out and bring them out the mix nicely.
And to automate, you just kind of hit the right button, and it will kind of record anything that you do to that channel or any of the inserts in it, which is really handy. And of course, we put a sidechain compressor over the return of that delay, because as you can hear, it goes on for quite some time. So just using the kick drum to duck that reverb and just kind of really impose that kick pattern on the rest of the track.
'Cause I originate.
So every time the kick's playing there, it's ducking that.
And the good thing about us using the trigger slightly separately, different to LFO tool, which a lot of people use, for two-step or breaks or where the kick's landing not on the 4/4s. It's really, really, really useful and very controllable.
And also our kick drum as well has got a bit of accenting on, which we didn't actually want to use for the trigger. So we've the great thing about having an independent sidechain trigger is you can actually clean up your trigger and have it triggering independently from your kick. So the another thing about having an independent sidechain trigger is, say for instance, in a breakdown, and it's quite a handy EDM trick. It sounds quite nice to have some of your parts being triggered with that ducking effect. I'm going to have to just recreate that quickly here. Say if you wanted your kick to have, your piano to have like a ducking effect, but without the kick playing, it's really handy to have independent control over your sidechain trigger. Right, house version of it on the fly. So it might be nice to have like a pumping effect in the breakdown, you know, which is kind of pleasing to the ear. So yeah, sidechaining a lot of stuff, which is kind of, again, why we're using this really cool little Sidechain Matrix where we can tap lots of sidechain, lots of kick copies of the kick and send them all the way around the arrangement to reverbs and vocals and bass lines and all sorts. So that's the vocal production.
So next we're going to talk to you about how we made our piano sound fat, ravey and old school. So as Jim said earlier, we used the Insonics SQL plugin,
which we bounced down as audio as well, I think, at one point, because the plugin kept loading up with an odd preset.
Yeah, so we've bounced that down, and a lot of people use the M1, and especially back in the day, used the M1 piano, but Mark was specific. Jim knew where it was from, so it gave a very, very old school feel. So the first thing that we did, I'm going to talk you through it. At the moment it's just playing before we've had any effects on it. So we brought in a nice vintage compressor, gave it a lovely bit of warmth. This one's just an inbuilt one in Steinberg, but there obviously it comes with most DAWs. Then we added a small bit of reverb. So just to say as well, often when we're using an M1 or an Insonics, we will take off all of the onboard effects and then we will play our own on there so we can use our side chains and whatever techniques that we're using.
This was just a little tiny bit of room reverb. It's almost like a slap back reverb with a tiny pre-delay, almost like a doubler really.
So we had that quite small, and then a tiny tinge of chorus as well. Just another little spice. And then once we had those all on, we ran it through just
a quick chat about the chorus. The Ensonics, the plugin itself, the original plugin, had a weird like pitchy panning thing going on to create a fake chorus effect, but it was very uncontrollable and unstable. So we got rid of it, and like Ed said, we just kind of cleaned it all up, had it really dry, and then introduced our own chorus, which gives us control back, really.
And then finally, we put it through a limiter just to control and smoothen out the overall levels. Nothing too harsh, but as you can see, it's just tickling around the very low areas, just to sit it nicely in the mix with a breakbeat and the vocal. Then we put it through our effects channel, which we spoke about earlier, which the vocal ran through with the delay and the side chaining. So the reverb and the delay gets side chained when the piano plays. It doesn't have as much reverb and delay. When it comes off, it increases the level using the sidechain. And again, just subtle, but all these little things chipping away. You can hear Jim just increasing the settings.
And then again, we used a sidechain from our kick drum.
Yeah, so once that was all routed, we then sent that to a further channel where we...
So that's just the sidechain on the reverb. And then we route it through this group for the effects.
So once we did the effects on all the piano, we then sent that to a further group where we applied some automation, and using groups allows us, if we had a piano and a string, or piano, string and a vocal, and lots of things we wanted to just spice up at the end, like here, we're stopping or filtering, we can apply that to the whole track or whatever elements we want using the group, rather than using an Effectrix 10 times in 10 on the same channel, on different channels doing the same thing. We're just grouping it all together. Here we've got a lovely stop that we've just automated on. And you can see here it filters. So we've automated that just on and off. You can use Midi or various things, but we've just literally just turned the plugin on and off. And you can also hear it on the break beat there as well. So that's triggering the break here. So we've tied that in with both the piano and the break there, and just adds little bits of detail to help the overall flow of the tune.
And then just talking about parts and stuff really now. We're quite happy with all our production. There were quite a few old school rave fills and stuff that just took a little bit of programming, some knowledge of old school synths and stuff. And we used some kind of up-to-date production on those fills. So it's just of the genre really, that's what we were looking for. We were just thinking rave, 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 bit of old and new. And that brings us nicely onto the breakdown section. Where we just wanted to chill the track out a bit, didn't we? It was everything was firing, MCs, bass lines, fills and stuff.
Bass, so low, watch the speakers, cause it'll blow. Rewind, come again, Mr. Vector. Pump it in like a fuel injector. Hard to the core. When we're done, you will fall off the more. DJ, you know we love it like this. MC, bring the lyrical twist.
Hold tight, the Raven Massive. Oh yes, Euphoria.
So it's almost like a jungle breakdown there, isn't it? With
yeah.
Like we've got a bit of a break beat going on. A bit of a sub bass, which is like an old 808 type coming out of the Anna. I don't know if there's anything special happened with that production. We just probably left it a bit loose caboose. A bit of a compressor, and a bit of EQ just to keep control of everything. We go through an EQ pretty much everything, just this tidying up process rather than a creative process.
And then we felt also that we wanted to give it a bit of atmosphere, so we actually used a bit of a rainforest sample,
which just come from like an ambience sample pack or something. And then probably just a bit of a string, and then like a little arpeggiator. which is what they would have used in the old days, really.
Yeah, and with the pan flute, there was a bit of pitch bend action that we just used as well on the automation. And one of the things that we do is if we're trying to use an instrument, we would try and think of the way it would be played. Or so if we're trying to recreate a pan flute part, maybe we'd have some knowledge of how a pan flute was played, or if we don't know, have a look at someone playing it and try and gain a bit of knowledge. And having an idea of that has been helpful, hasn't it?
Yeah, it works really well with guitars. If you're trying to recreate a guitar, knowing that you've only got 6 strings, so don't press a 7th key. And things like trying to recreate real drums, if someone's playing a snare drum with their right hand, they can't then play the hi-hat at the same time. So having some knowledge, as Ed says, of real instruments really helps you to kind of get into the essence of that instrument and what you're trying to recreate, and stops it sounding mechanical and processed, if that's what you're after. So yeah, that pan flute had a little bit of sausage fattener, just to dirty it up, because GM sounds tend to be very clean. It's almost like Ed and I like to use GM sounds almost as a challenge to get them to sound good.
And sometimes you wanna twist it up so that it does that. How has someone done that with that instrument? And in this case, we used the pitch bend.
And it's got that little vibrato on it as well, which I think is a natural part of the instrument. And then just once again, we're just using this ducking technique so that the pan flute will actually duck its own reverbs and delays and then turn them back up again when it finishes playing. There's quite a few on there. Trying to find it. And then just sidechain compressors off the kick then as well, which we always put on as a matter of course, but in this particular instance I don't think that there was a kick trigger in the breakdown over the top of the pan flute, but the delays certainly had a sidechain trigger on them as well. And that was pretty much it. I think that we did a bit of vocal production. We took the end of Ev's ad-lib and kind of repeated that to kick back into our main tune.
Using a pitch.
Again, using automation to pitch that. So we're using our own, rather than just grabbing a rise or something from a sample pack, we're actually using parts of Ev's vocal to generate our own parts for us.
So just going to talk a little bit about arrangements and how we use arrangements and why we use arrangements. So within a track, you'll normally have a few different versions, and depending on whether you're in the UK or America, potentially even more. The main club version will generally have beats on our tracks. We'll have beats so that a DJ can mix them in, and they have beats at the start and beats at the end. And it will have slightly drawn out stages of the track. As you can see, this is nice for a DJ to mix. Always try and give a DJ a mix that they can play. If a DJ's got 2 tracks, one difficult to mix or one easy to mix, I know which one I go for, so help them out. Be kind to the DJ. So this time we're just using nice simple before we get into the breakdown. On a radio edit, you want things to happen a lot quicker. Generally, you want impacts, you want stings, you want the track moving on. Radio time is valuable, and tracks don't get played for as long as they might potentially in a club. So in this instance, on a radio edit, and as you see, we've used marker tracks at the top here, so it's clearly marked out for us when we're bouncing, exporting, going back, and we'll use that on most of the tracks we do.
Also, the whole idea of you might as well do it now while the session's live, while it's fresh. Do these versions now and an instrumental as well. Get them out and an a cappella, and possibly even bounce out some of your remix stems as well while you're here, or using these same markers so you know that everything's going to line up. The whole point of having a radio edit is because you want to be able to exploit your music. Like Ed says, you want a DJ to be able to grab it if he's struggling in a mix. You want a DJ to be able to play it on the radio. You've got to make sure you give everyone all the options that they need to be able to play your track.
And actually on this particular track, we had a different video edit to the radio edit, because the video edit was slightly shorter, slightly tighter. Things happened just quicker to help out the video maker.
Yeah, there was, at one point we were talking about having an animated video for this, and he was charging per second or per minute, wasn't he? So it was worth having a slightly shorter version and a tighter version as well. And then obviously you can just mute the vocal to have an instrumental.
Also, what we didn't speak about is in the main club mix, in terms of arrangement, we'll use percussive elements or elements of the track to keep the track moving and fresh. So as we just spoke about in the breakdown, in the first breakdown you didn't hear the pan pipes. We sort of saved, or the jungle bass, we saved something and let the track develop as a whole. If you show all your cards in the very first breakdown, there's nothing to look forward to later on in the track. So that's a technique that we'll use in terms of once we've got the elements, that we will space them out. And the same applies for drums. We'll use extra drums to, I think we used that, the Tom-esque.
The block.
Yeah, the block.
Thing.
We didn't bring it in straight away. We used it in, and we dropped it out for certain elements. So when a vocal's playing, you might want to drop out some of the drums. When you very first drop, you might just want a kick drum and a bass to be able to give you a huge mix sound. But you might want it just to fire in with all the drums. So, yeah.
This block was quite interesting. It was just like wherever it is. Where is it gone?
Is it muted on the...
Oh, there it is. There?
Oh, yeah.
It's a really cool part. Again, that was just a GM instrument, but we just kind of used a pitch bend up and down on a block with a massive reverb to... So it's a percussive element that become a progressive part of the track later on.
Yeah, and so use your arrangement to help develop your drums, your sounds. You might want another layer coming in, or on the second drop you might want it to be slightly different. So one good tip to help you with this, if you're not used to doing arrangements on radio, find a track that you know works in a club, or a track that you know that you love on the radio. Bring that into your arrangement and look at emulating the arrangement they've got. It's a very useful track. Can also help a lot with mix downs as well.
Yeah.
If you're aiming for something, bring something else into your track. Give yourself a reference point, because you might be working away for 10, 12 hours and then you play it up against a track that you know that you like and it's like, oh, it doesn't sound as great. If you start with a reference point, it can really help things. Not in terms of copying, but just give you an idea. Once you've got the knowledge, it's just comes second nature.
And last but not least, what we'll do is we'll just bounce that out, and we'll bounce it out dry with nothing, no limiters or compressors or anything like that over the master, because we do the mastering as a separate process, which we're going to go into in the next video. But other than that, we just bounce out dry as a 24-bit WAV or an AIFF file, so that then we can bring that into the mastering as the third part of the session.
Okay, so that's all we've got time for right now, but make sure you come and join us for part 2. Inside.